you may want to grab yourself a drink, possibly a snack for this one, because today I am talking about the first 25 traps from the Saw franchise in the first of a little mini-series that I am starting here on my channel. Now, the Saw franchise was the first horror franchise that I properly fell in love with. I owe a lot to this franchise. There are some personal reasons as well, but I am not going to go into that today. But I am so excited to finally be talking about Saw on my channel again. But first, if you're new here, I go by Hordes, and if you're not new, welcome back. I talk about horror movies here on my channel on Mondays and Fridays, so if that sounds like something you might be interested in, maybe even stick around and join the Horde here on my channel by clicking that subscribe button, or if you're feeling extra generous, maybe even click the like button, because that massively helps me out as a content creator. Now, obviously, there will be spoilers galore for the first 3 Saw movies. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to give you some information that you might not have already known about the traps from these 3 movies. And if you haven't seen these movies, what are you doing here? Go watch the 3 movies and then come back and join in with the discussion. So I am now going to shrink myself down and appear in one of these 2 corners. So let's get on to ranking the traps first from Saw 1, then 2, and then 3 in the order that they actually appear. Quickly though, I will be using the S to D tier rankings because this makes it really straightforward. You know exactly what is higher than everything else, because the number of times that I have seen a tier list and been like, I do not know what you mean when you say I want to play a game is possibly higher than There Will Be Blood, or the other way around, so we're keeping it straightforward. I will just say I have my laptop right here because I brought notes, like I came prepared for this. Now, the very first trap that we ever come across in a Saw game is actually the bathroom trap. It opens up the entire franchise. Now, the victims / survivors of this trap are Adam Stanheight, Dr. Lawrence Gordon, and by proxy, Zepp Hindle, and I am going to include Detective Tapp in this, even though he dies in the corridors that lead to the bathroom. Now, the thing about this one is it feels like an escape game before escape games were really like big and hyped up, because John basically sets up all of this trap. Amanda then doesn't really do what she's supposed to, and because of this we then get the iconic moments with Dr. Gordon having to saw his own foot to escape because the key to the shackles is missing at this point. Now, if Amanda had actually listened to John, this game would have played out very differently. It would have just been an escape game. You follow the clues from clue to clue, and then eventually you can get up and leave, and hopefully before Zepp gets there. But that is the entire point of the iconic bathroom game. And I feel like, yes, it's iconic, but is it the most iconic part of the original Saw movie? And I'm going to say no, because I think that while the location is iconic and the moment with Dr. Lawrence sawing off his own foot is iconic, the game itself is fairly straightforward. So because of that, this one is going in B tier. Like, solid start, but it's going in B tier. The next trap is the razor wire trap, and the victim for this one is Paul Lee, and the reason that he's being tested is because, to try and put this one in YouTube friendly terms, Paul decides that he doesn't want to be alive anymore, and he does something with a razor blade. And John decides that maybe this guy doesn't actually want to go through with it, and maybe this is a cry for attention. And there is something so sadistic about asking somebody who's to crawl through a tunnel lined with razor wire, because normally the act itself would release endorphins, it would release dopamine, the happy hormone, and this scenario flips this entire thing on its head, because there is going to be no dopamine reaction to this because you are in such a high stress scenario. It's so sadistic, and I have to give it points for this because this is one of the few traps in the first movie that is actually kind of tailored to the victim / survivor that is in the scenario. So because of this, even though it only appears briefly, it is very clever, And because of that, it's going in B tier as well. It's going just below the bathroom trap, but it's still going in B tier. Up next, we have the flammable jelly trap, and the victim to this one is Mark Wilson, and he is being tested because he is making fraudulent claims saying that he has bad health, and John has found out that this is all just a big lie. Now, you actually see this guy's trap being assembled in one of the Saw movies as well, and this is the first example of a trap feeling kind of like anybody could be in this trap, and I think that it would have been better designed for somebody else. Now, hear me out. You're asking somebody who is covered in flammable jelly to walk on broken glass and find a code to a safe in a room that you can only see by the light of a candle with numbers all over the wall. Now, to me, this says, give this to an arsonist rather than somebody who's doing fraudulent health claims. I still think it's fine, but I think it is the most forgettable out of the flashback traps in the first movie, and because of that, I'm gonna have to put this one in C tier. Up next is what I consider to be the most iconic moment from the original Saw movie, and that is the reverse bear trap and our survivor Amanda Young, who at this point is just a drug addict who has been tested by Jigsaw. Now, when you think of an iconic moment in the Saw franchise, you think of Shawnee Smith wearing the reverse bear trap. Now, this is the first appearance of the reverse bear trap, and it's the only time it's actually used in a proper test. In Saw 6 and 7, it does come back, but at that point, it's just a murder weapon. And a random little trivia piece for you is, despite the number of times that this actually appears over the entire franchise, it only ever claims one victim. There's, if you're including the short movie for this, you get the guy from the first one survives, I think he's called David, then you get Amanda survive, Hoffman survives, and then later on it claims Jill Tark. Then you add in that there is actually a victim in this particular game, and that is the dead cellmate on the floor, who actually has a name. He's called Donnie Greco. The incredibly short timer, the build-up of tension, and it's actually a really good trap. But I will say, like the flammable jelly trap, you could kind of switch anybody into this trap and it would still make sense. It's not particularly tailored to anybody, but it is the origin story for one of our apprentices, and it's one of the most iconic moments in the entire franchise. So because of this, I do have to give this to an A tier. Next is the drill chair. The survivor of this one is Jeff Rindenauer. Yes, the man does have a name. And I feel like that this is probably one of the most throwaway traps in the entire franchise, because while I know this guy's name, so many people have no idea who he is, and nobody knows why he's being tested, because that has never been revealed. Like, it looks cool and everything, but it's a delaying tactic really to help John escape, so it's kind of just there to fill time. So it's kind of gonna have to go in D tier because it doesn't really do anything. The quadruple shotgun. Now, I understand that this one claims a victim, as its victim is Detective Stephen Singh, who is Detective Tap's second in command. However, I wouldn't say this was a trap. This is another security measure. John has put this here in case anything goes wrong and somebody is gonna leg it after him down that back corridor. And yes, it kills Detective Singh, but it does feel like at that point, he is the second detective on the case. You're following Detective Tap, and it's Detective Tap who is relentless in his search for the Jigsaw killer. So, does it have the impact to make me understand why Taps decides he's going to fall to pieces? No, because the attachment to Detective Singh isn't really there. And because it's not an actual trap and it is a security measure, I am going to put this one in D tier. But I'm going to put it above the drill chair because I think it's better. Zepp's test. Now, Zepp was a former hospital orderly who actually really cared about the patients that he came in contact with. one of those patients happens to be John, and the only person he seems to really have an issue with is Dr. Lawrence Gordon, because Dr. Gordon is very, like, impersonal and cold with his patients, and when Zepp says, like, this patient has a name, Dr. Gordon then humiliates him in front of his peers, and later on, when he's selected by John, you kind of see the tables turn when Zepp is suddenly asked to kidnap and hold hostage Dr. Lawrence's family, and there is suddenly this, like, power trip, because his inferiority complex is suddenly gone, and he starts to thrive on having this power that wasn't there before. And Zepp is actually the first of two protagonists who is originally shown as an antagonist, the other one being Art Blank in Saw 4. Now, both of these people are actually victims. They're being tasked by Jigsaw to do something. They're being tested for unknown reasons. Art Blank's is a little bit more obvious because he's John's lawyer, but Zepp kind of really hasn't done anything at this point besides not like Dr. Gordon. Like, it's his test that caused him to become unhinged. He wasn't already unhinged prior. And while Zepp is important at moving all of the story along, you do forget that he's actually doing all of this because he needs an antidote to a poison that is trickling through his veins, hint hint for the upcoming Saw 2 movie. And in the end, he actually dies when Adam smashes his brains in with the system, like the top of a cistern tank. And because of this, I do think he's probably the weakest of the actual tests that I'm going to mention compared to all the others. So I'm going to put him in C tier. I'm going to put him above the flammable gel trap. But I have to put him in C tier because he doesn't have the best test as far as I'm concerned. On to the traps from Saw 2. The first trap that we come across is the Venus flytrap / the death mask, and the victim for this one is Michael Marks. Michael is a police informant / snitch, and I do think that this is a really good way to open Saw 2, as it's very similar to the reverse bear trap from the first movie. It's a small trap, it's very sort of easy to like set up and move around. At this point, Saw hasn't suddenly decided to do enormous traps all the time, and this is a bit like, think the reverse bear trap, but instead if your head was crushed by an Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors, but instead of teeth it was nails. So I think the fact that the key behind Michael's eye is going to be a selling point for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people that are squeamish about eyeballs, not me personally, so that is going to mess with some audience members. But I do think that this one is going to have to go in low B tier. It doesn't deserve C tier, but I am going to put this one below the razor wire trap at the moment. It's going at the very tail end of B tier. The electrified staircase. Now, while this injures 3 people, including Detective Pete Baker, which is the only officer that gets mentioned by name, I consider this trap a fail because it's designed to give a lethal shock to anybody that triggers it, and not a single person dies. Like, I forgot that this was even considered a trap. Like, to me, this is another security measure. Like, Billy rides out on his tricycle, he laughs for a bit, and then the cops fall down the stairs and there's a little bit of electricity. So, for me, it's going in D tier because it's forgettable and it's a security trap. The nerve gas house. Now, there are multiple victims and survivors for this one, and they are, if I can remember everybody, Daniel, Amanda, Gus, Laura, Obi, Xavier, Addison, and Jonah. Now, you kind of need to suspend your disbelief a little bit with this one, but it will not be the first time that you have to do this in the Saw universe, so welcome to the Saw universe. Please leave your disbelief or belief at the door and just roll with it. Now, the nerve gas house is actually inspired by the Tokyo subway attacks. John briefly mentions this in the tape when they all wake up in the antidote room. And if you don't know, the Tokyo subway attacks actually took place on March 20th, 1995 by a cult in Japan that surprisingly still exists, where 5 separate attacks were all taken at the exact same time on 3 separate lines of the Tokyo Underground. Now, they used a nerve gas called sarin, and in the end, 13 people were killed, 50 people were severely injured, including some of them actually succumbing to their injuries afterwards. And nearly 1,000 people suffered vision problems because of this. Now, to give you an idea, sarin is a nerve gas, and what a nerve gas does is it actually blocks the neurotransmitters from sending messages to your various organs and body parts. So, if you are exposed to this, within 1 to 10 minutes, we're talking even the tiniest amount, your body will lose control of its bladder, its bowels, you will profusely salivate, your eyes will become dilated, and you will either die of asphyxiation or from cardiac arrest. Now, once you know all this, you suddenly realise that the nerve gas house is a little bit more deadly than you first realised that it was going to be. But what it does tell you though is the longer that you are exposed to a nerve gas in a situation like this, the less likely it is that you are going to be able to get your hands on an antidote, because your body is going to start shutting down, it's going to lose control of all your bodily functions. Like, the longer you are exposed, the less likely you are to survive your trap, because your brain is not going to communicate with the rest of you to do so. So because of all of this, and now that I've told you a little bit more info about it, the nerve gas house is actually going in A tier. It's going level with the reverse bear trap, but it's got to go in A tier. The antidote room. Now, I wouldn't consider this a trap, but if you look up a list of saw traps, then strangely, this is actually considered a trap. Now, would I consider a room with a safe in it that has nothing else that could harm you a trap? No. So because of this, it is automatically going in D tier, and it's going below the drill chair. The Magnum eye hole trap. Now, the victim of this one is Gus Colliard. This is another security measure that just so happens to claim a victim, and this one is so easily avoided if you followed the rules. John simply said, sit in the room and wait. Did they listen? No, so Gus got shot in the face, and it's kind of a stupid way to go. So because of that, it is gonna go down in D tier. It's gonna go just after the quadruple shotgun, because that also claims somebody, but this one was stupid. Like, you could have avoided this one. Detective Singh couldn't have avoided his death, but Gus could. The furnace trap. The victim of this one is Obi Tate, and a bit of random trivia for you. This is not the first time that Obi has actually been tested in a Saw game. Obi actually actively sought out John to be tested, but you wouldn't know this unless you have played the Saw video game on PS3/Xbox 360, when you find out that Obi's life wasn't in his own hands during his test, because you play as Detective Tapp and you have to help him get out of a crematorium furnace. So this is not the first time that this man has faced the wrath of fire. Now, I do think that this trap is fairly winnable if you keep calm. There is a little sort of nozzle that you need to twist on the inside to turn off the fire, but if you panic, it's game over for you, and this has got to be one of the worst ways to die. Nobody wants to be burnt to death, like, because you would feel every single second of this. Now, when it comes to just standalone solo traps, I do think that this, along with one other trap in Saw 2, is the most memorable. So because of this, I'm gonna put this in low A tier. I'm gonna put it after the nerve gas house, but it still needs to go in A tier. The needle pit. This one is actually Xavier's test, but Xavier says, like hell am I getting in the needle pit, old man, and decides to throw Amanda in instead. Now, I think out of everything in Saw 2, the needle pit is probably the one that most people are gonna remember, because studies have actually shown that as many as 22% of adults actually have some kind of needle fear. I'm not one of them. I have 10 tattoos, and that would be weird if I was scared of needles. But even I flinch when Amanda gets thrown into that pit. Not because of the fear of needles, because you know that that would hurt like hell, especially if you got a needle go in the wrong place. Now, the first time I watched this, I did not expect Xavier to pick Amanda up and throw her in that pit. And it is made even worse by the exceptional performance of Shawnee Smith. Because when you find out that Needles is actually Shawnee Smith's biggest fear, and she was pregnant at the time that she actually did this stunt, it makes it even worse, which is why it is the first trap that is actually going in S tier. The razor box. The victim from this one is Addison, and this one is actually Gus's trap. In an earlier draft of the script, it was actually said on the tape that it was designed to punish the hands that harmed innocent others when his anger reached its peak, suggesting that Gus was like really aggressive. And you actually see Gus in one of the other movies in a flashback in Jill's clinic. Now, in an original draft, you were actually going to find out what Addison's test was going to be, and it involved a like waffle iron kind of trap where her wrists were held down on top of waffle irons, and she would need to press her face into another one to ruin her good looks because Addison's a prostitute. That's why she's there. And I would have loved to have seen that trap included because that sounds gnarly as hell. But this trap is kind of easy to beat when you know the loophole. Now, if you put your hands in the razor blades, there is no way for you to get your wrists back out without any kind of assistance. And let's be honest, in this house, nobody's helping anybody out unless they think that they're going to get something out of it. But if you look closely, the front panel of the box actually has a padlock with the key still in it. So all you would need to do is walk round to the front of the box, simply put the key and twist it, and open the front flap, and there's your antidote. So, because of this, it's kind of gonna have to go in C tier. It looks cool, it claims Addison at the end of the day, and it's far more gnarly looking than the quadruple shotgun or the Magnum eye hole was. So it's going in low C tier. Detective Eric Matthews' test. Survivor, later turned hostage, and then dead later on. Spoilers. But I know that there are people out there that like Detective Eric Matthews. I am not one of them, because I don't care that John is a serial killer. The second you start beating up a dying man who has cancer, bye, don't care what happens to you at that point, because clearly you've learned nothing. John simply said, all you have to do is sit and talk to me and your son will be in a safe place. Now, Eric has a history of framing people. It's why everybody is in the nerve gas house to begin with. Everybody in there besides Daniel, he put false evidence against them so that they would get sent down. And he clearly learns absolutely nothing. And I didn't care what happened to him. I really didn't. Like, he could have been left in the bathroom at the end of Saw 2 for all I care. He didn't learn his lesson. He's not the first person to not learn his lesson. And while I think that it is a better test than Zepp's test was, I still think that this is going to have to go in low B tier. And the reason that this is being placed higher is because the reveal of when you find out that Daniel is actually in the safe behind John, like, is a jaw drop moment the first time. And if you say that you saw this coming, I'm gonna call you a liar, because nobody saw that coming in the first one, and you are just lying to yourself at this point. On to Saw 3, and my personal favourite of the Saw movies, and it opens with the classroom trap, and the victim of this one is Troy. Now, this is actually the first unwinnable / rigged trap that we actually get introduced to. Like, the door is welded shut, so you couldn't even get out if you somehow managed to remove all of the chains from you, which, to get sciencey again, isn't possible, because if you got he has got 2 chains through his Achilles tendons. If you managed to pull them out, you wouldn't physically be able to walk because your feet are not connected to your calf muscles anymore. Like, you would be crawling around on the floor. And the other thing is, no human has the strength to pull their own bottom jaw off. Like, you could pull somebody else's off with your entire weight behind it in a pulling motion, but you do not have the strength in a pushing motion to remove your own lower jaw. So basically, Troy was screwed. The only thing he could have physically done is hid behind a bunch of furniture, like a barricade, and hope to God that the nail bomb, when it exploded, didn't have so much force that it went through the furniture, and hope that somebody managed to unweld the door before he bled to death. Now, it's not on screen for very long, this one, so I'm gonna say it's going in C tier. The angel wing trap. The victim of this one is Detective Alison Kerry, and this is the second in a row, as well as the second rigged trap that you actually see. Now, this is a personal favourite of mine, and it is a hint at something that Saw 3 introduced with its traps. The green lighting in this trap is beautiful when you see Alison Kerry silhouetted in that trap, just hanging there with the arching angel wings. But the green lighting is actually an indication of what this trap is going to be about, because it's telling you that it's an acid trap. Now, this trap is so simple that I can't not love how straightforward it is. You put your hand in the acid, you remove the key, and you unlock the braces around your rib cage, and it will cause you to fall to the floor. But normally I hate unwinnable traps. There's just something about them. But for this one, I will make an exception, because I just love how this trap looks, how it works. So because of this, my bias is telling me it's going in S tier, and it's going above the needle pit. The shotgun collar. The victim of this one is Dr. Lynn Denlon, and she's a victim much later in the movie for this one. This one is very similar to the reverse bear trap or the Venus flytrap death mask one, in the sense of it's really simple how this one works. This one's built by Amanda, and it is linked to John's heart rate. If John dies, your face paints the walls, and it is gory, gory beautiful. Like, when this goes off at the end and there's just a hole where Lynn's face was, great. So yes, it is there to stall time, and I understand that, but it's still a big part of the plot, and it's a great time staller, and there's a lot of tension, so it's gotta go in B tier. It's going above the Venus flytrap mask, but it's still gotta go in B tier. Jeff's trial. This is gonna be one of two parts. I hate Jeff with every fibre of my being. Like, I understand that he has lost a son, so has Lynn. Surprise, they're husband and wife, but like I said, if you've not seen these movies, why are you here? Go and watch them first and then come back and discuss. They are both, though, neglecting their daughter and ruining their marriage by not having any kind of communication in the slightest, and this man has made his entire personality just being an angry asshole who wants revenge on 3 people. Now, 2 of the people that he wants revenge on were simply humans that made mistakes, and the third person was just doing his job. The whole point of Jeff's test is that he has to learn forgiveness. He half-asses 2 out of the 3 of them, if you want my honest opinion, and he very clearly could have saved absolutely everybody. So this first part I have to put in the high C tier, but there is another part to go on this one, so bear with me. But I'm gonna put it above Zepp's test for this one, because at least Jeff has an actual reason to be tested. The freezer room. The victim from this one is Danica Scott, who was the witness that never testified in the hit and run incident that killed Jeff and Lynn's son. Now, the lighting in this trap is already a clue for you. It is blue, which means it's gonna be an ice trap. Now, this woman never stood a chance, because the second that Jeff heard the tape that said that she was the witness that never testified, he'd already made his mind up. He waited until she had been sprayed 3 times with freezing cold water while naked in a freezer, and she had begged for forgiveness and said that she was sorry for everything that had happened before he even made an attempt to try and save her. Now, I love how this looks. I love how it ends with Danica like frozen in a solid block of ice. So for me, out of the three big traps, it is the weakest one out of the three. They sort of escalate from this point onwards, and none of them I think are bad in Saw 3, which is why I am actually going to put this one in B tier, and it's going to go above the shotgun collar. The pig vat. The survivor of this one is Judge Holden, who was the presiding judge over the hit and run case. The red and orange lighting in this one is also another indication that things are about to get fiery in here. This has got to be one of the worst traps in the entire franchise to find yourself in, because you are 100% relying on an unpredictable individual who absolutely hates your guts to put aside their feelings and emotions to save you from drowning in rotten pig soup, and you are chained to the bottom of a vat by your neck. So you are getting gobfuls of this pig soup on a loop. Like, this is rancid, and it's one of the traps that I would never want to find myself in, because I don't think anybody with an ounce of sense would want to be in this trap. Now, do I think that making somebody burn the possessions of their deceased child to get a key to save someone is a little bit extreme? Yes. Do I think that it's extreme for Jeff, who is purely fueled by vengeance, has another child who have they entirely neglected? No, it's not. Like, this man needs to learn that you can't live your entire life purely fueled by anger. And because of this, and how rancid this trap is, but I love the pigs in this. If you've ever seen the behind the scenes for Saw 3, you'll know that they actually had 4 of these foam pig carcasses that they kept putting on a loop to do this, and they've got names, which makes me love them even more. So because of that, I am actually going to put this one in A tier, and I'm going to put it above the furnace trap because I like this one. I do like this one a lot. The rack. The victim of this trap is Timothy Young, who is the man responsible for the hit and run accident that killed Jeff and Lynn's son. Judge Holden also dies in this room from pure stupidity, so that's a bonus, I guess. Now, bonus fun trivia fact as well, you actually, in Saw X, see John designing this trap, so there's a little fun fact for you. Now, the first visual on Timothy's face in the rack with that zoom out is one of the most amazing things in this movie as far as I'm concerned. Like, that reveal to show you just a sneak peek and pull away to that reveal of a man strapped to a metal cross is great. Now, you also can't tell me that Jeff really tried in this one either, because when I need to add in a little bit of common sense and thought into this one, because there's a couple of Saw traps that also will have you thinking this way. Do you forgive the person in the trap but let them die? Because if you let Timothy live, he is going to be 100% reliant on other people to help him live on a daily basis, because he's going to have surgery on both legs, possibly both arms, depending on how quick it is. Like, what kind of quality of life is Timothy going to have if he actually gets out of this trap alive? You can't tell me that you'd be able to live a normal life, because you would be in surgery, you'd be in physical therapy, you may never walk again, you may never be able to use your hands again. Like, this trap is completely life-altering. And once you add this dilemma into it and realise that Jeff is kind of half-arsing it, it is a moral dilemma. And because it makes me think so much, I am actually gonna put this one in A tier because there is so much going for this trap, and I am gonna put it, I think, above the nerve gas house. Jeff's final test. Now, our victims in this one are John Kramer and Lynn Denlon by proxy, and I hate this part so much, but the fact that Jeff loses absolutely everything makes this a little bit bittersweet, you know what I mean? Like, you wasted John's death at the hands of Jeff, and I will never not be angry about this. You can't tell me that John choosing to end his own life in this scenario wouldn't have made more sense and been better overall. Like, Jeff learned nothing, and Jeff has just shot Amanda. I know Amanda shot Lynn, not the point, but Jeff has clearly learned absolutely nothing. Amanda is dying, and Amanda is one of the two people besides Jill that John cares the most about. So because Jeff has learned nothing, I would have loved to have seen John, in an act of revenge, end things on his term and take Dr. Lynn with him at the same time. Jeff is really the first character who actively chooses not to become a better person because of his trap, or to learn to forgive and realise that how he's living life is having such a negative and knock-on effect. Like, he's neglecting a child at the end of the day. He has another child that needs her parents to step up and be parents, and because of this he ends up failing his test, thankfully, because I can't stand this man. He's probably my least favourite character in the entire Saw franchise, and he dies in the same room as everybody else when he gets shot by Agent Strome in Saw 4, so I'm not sorry about it. So because of this, he's going in the top part of C tier, above the previous Jeff's test, but I will never not be angry that they wasted John's death on this guy. Amanda's test. The victim is Amanda Young, and this is the third time that you see her appear in a test. Now, this is the best solo test of anybody in the Saw franchise, and I am about to back up this claim. This is before you find out that it is Hoffman that sent Amanda the letter, basically blackmailing her by knowing the fact that she was there on the night that Jill Tuck lost her and John's baby when Cecil broke into Jill's clinic. Now, what makes this so good is, up until this point, Amanda has been putting her victims in unwinnable traps, and Amanda finds herself in a situation that mirrors this, because whatever Amanda decides to do in this scenario, Amanda cannot win. You can have the best will and intention in the world, but if somebody else is pulling the puppet strings, there is nothing that you can do, which is exactly what Hoffman is doing in this scenario. If she does what Hoffman wants and if she kills Lynn, Jeff is going to come in and kill John anyway. So whatever she does, she is going to lose John in some kind of way. So because of this, it has to go in S tier, and it is actually going to go at the very top of S tier. So there you have it, my ranking for the first 25 traps from the first 3 Saw movies. If you want to discuss anything that I talked about in this, please feel free to drop it in the comment section down below, because I'm always game to talk about more Saw stuff, and I will be doing the rest of the Saw movies throughout the rest of the year leading up towards Christmas time, so expect to see them sort of sporadically sprinkled in throughout my channel. If you want to know where else you can find me though, I am also over on Instagram and Letterboxd at HordesOfHorror, or maybe, like I said at the beginning, even stick around and join the Horde here on YouTube, because I would love to have you. I will be back though on Friday with another solo movie review, and this time it's a 2024 release that came out back in January, because I'm kind of on a folklore horror kick at the moment, and it's about time that I actually got round to this one. So until next time, bye.